Breakpoint Station hung in space like a massive metal flower. Its observation decks pointed toward the stellar anomaly it had been built to study. The anomaly was beautiful in a dangerous way, swirling colors that shouldn't exist, gravity that bent in impossible directions. Minho loved it. He had been studying the anomaly for 6 months when Hana arrived. She walked into the astrophysics lab carrying 2 bags and wearing the same practical field clothes she always wore, even though there were no jungles in space. They said you needed a xenobiologist, Hana said by way of greeting. Minho looked up from his calculations and smiled. We do. There are organic compounds in the anomaly's emissions that nobody can identify. We're hoping you can figure out if they're related to any known life forms. Sounds interesting? It is. Also, I read about the boot incident, Hana sighed. Everyone has read about the boot incident. I think it was brave, Minho said. Stupid, maybe, but brave. I'll take that as a compliment. They became friends quickly. Minho found that Hana asked good questions about his work, and she seemed genuinely interested in the anomaly's properties. Hana appreciated that Minho never treated her like a celebrity or acted like she was crazy for helping the Mauler cub. Breakpoint Station had a crew of 300, representing 17 different species. The Velcrin engineers kept the station running. The Torgath security personnel maintained order and safety. The Grushid medical staff handled the health needs of the diverse crew. And the scientists from various species studied the anomaly, trying to understand what it was and where it came from. Hana settled into her new routine. She spent mornings analyzing the organic compounds, afternoons helping Minho with his calculations, and evenings in the common areas getting to know the other crew members. She made friends with a young Velcrin engineer named Kixtha and a Torgath guard named Groth, who was surprisingly gentle despite his intimidating appearance. 6 months after Hana arrived, the solar flare hit. The warning came at 0347 station time. Alarms blared across every deck. Minho was already in the lab, working late as usual when Hana ran in. Solar flare from the anomaly, she said quickly. Massive energy spike. The shields are overloading. They felt the impact 30 seconds later. The station shuddered like a living thing in pain. Lights flickered. The gravity generators stuttered, causing everyone to float for a sickening moment before slamming back down. Then the hull breach alarm started. Minho pulled up the damage report on his screen. His face went pale. Multiple breaches. Sections 3A through 7D. The cascade is spreading. The station's AI voice echoed through the corridors. All personnel to escape pods. This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to escape pods. Hana was already checking her data pad, scanning for life signs. Her hands moved quickly across the screen. Then she stopped, her finger hovering over one section. Section 7C, she said quietly. There are life signs. Multiple small signatures. Minho looked at the data. His stomach dropped. That's the education section. The Velcrin younglings. They were on a field trip today. The Torgath security chief, a massive warrior named Drexnall, entered the lab at a run. All personnel must evacuate now. The damaged sections are being sealed. Standard procedure. There are children in Section 7C, Hana said. Drexnall's expression didn't change. Section 7C is beyond the collapsed bulkhead in Corridor 6. Travel time through the damaged sections in zero gravity is 18 minutes minimum. The section will lose full atmosphere in 12 minutes. Rescue is impossible. Nothing is impossible, Minho said. He was already moving toward the equipment lockers, pulling out emergency suits. As security chief, I cannot authorize this, Drexnall said. His voice was firm but not cruel. You will die attempting this rescue. The logical choice is to save the majority. I'm not asking for authorization, Minho said. He tossed a suit to Hana. I'm informing you that we're going. Hana caught the suit and started putting it on. How many younglings? Scanner shows 23 younglings and 2 teachers, Minho said. All Velcrin, so they're small. We can carry multiple at once if we have to. Drexnall watched them suit up. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he stepped aside. I will not stop you, but I am noting in my report that you acted against direct orders. Noted, Hana said. She sealed her helmet and checked the oxygen supply. Let's go. They ran through the station corridors. Emergency lights cast everything in red. The gravity was unstable, sometimes pulling too hard, sometimes barely there at all. They passed crew members heading in the opposite direction toward the escape pods. A Grashid scientist grabbed Hana's arm as she ran past. "You're going the wrong way." "We know," Hana said and kept running. They reached Corridor 6 and found the collapsed bulkhead. A support beam had fallen across the passageway, and the walls on either side had buckled inward. The gap at the top was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. "Oxygen levels on the other side are already dropping," Minho said, reading his suit display. "We have maybe 10 minutes now." They climbed over the debris. On the other side, the damage was worse. The corridor was torn open in places, showing the black of space beyond. The emergency force fields held, but they flickered unstably. Hana's suit tore on a piece of jagged metal. She felt the air pressure change instantly. Her suit's emergency seal activated, but the damage was done. She had lost about 20% of her oxygen supply in that one rip. "I'm fine," she said before Minho could ask. "Keep moving." They launched themselves through the zero-gravity sections, pulling along the handholds. The radiation alarms in their suits were screaming. The flare had saturated this area with dangerous particles. Their suits would protect them for a while, but not forever. 8 minutes left. They reached Section 7C and found the emergency door jammed. The mechanism had been damaged in the collapse. Minho pulled out the plasma torch and started cutting. "Hurry," Hana said quietly. She was watching the oxygen readings for the section. The younglings were using up the air fast, probably panicking. The torch cut through the door seal. Minho's arm was shaking. The radiation was affecting him already, but he kept cutting. 6 minutes left. The door finally gave way. Inside, they found chaos. 23 Velcrin younglings were huddled in one corner, their small bodies pressed together. Their 4 eyes were wide with fear. The 2 teachers were frozen, unable to move, their bodies locked in the Velcrin panic response. "We're here to help," Hana said, knowing they probably couldn't understand her through the helmets and the fear. "We're getting you out." They grabbed younglings 2 at a time and started moving back through the damaged corridor. The small Velcrin weighed almost nothing, but they were terrified and struggling. Hana held them as gently as she could while moving as fast as possible. 4 minutes left. Minho's suit tore on the same piece of metal that had damaged Hana's, but his tear was worse. His entire right arm was exposed. He cried out in pain as the radiation hit his skin directly, but he didn't drop the younglings he was carrying. "Go back," he said through gritted teeth. "Get them out." "I'll bring the teachers." "We go together," Hana said. They made 3 trips. Each time they carried younglings through the damaged sections, over the collapsed bulkhead to where other crew members waited to rush them to safety. Each trip, the oxygen in Section 7C dropped lower. Each trip, the radiation counters on their suits climbed higher. 2 minutes left. On the final trip, Hana physically lifted one of the frozen teachers. The Velcrin was rigid with panic, her body locked up. "I've got you," Hana said, even though the teacher couldn't hear. "You're going to be okay." Minho was carrying the other teacher and the last 3 younglings. His right arm hung useless now, badly burned by the radiation. He pushed himself forward using only his left arm and his legs. 1 minute left. They pulled themselves through the corridor. The emergency force fields were failing. In places they could see the gaps, could see space waiting to pull them out. They kept moving. 30 seconds. They reached the collapsed bulkhead. Other crew members were there now, reaching through to grab the younglings. Hands pulled the small Velcrin to safety, pulled the teachers through. 15 seconds, Hana and Minho climbed over the debris. Behind them, Section 7C's atmosphere failed completely. If they had been 30 seconds slower, everyone would have died. They made it to the safe zone and collapsed. Medical teams swarmed over them immediately. Minho was unconscious within seconds, his body finally giving up after pushing beyond every limit. Hana stayed awake long enough to count. 23 younglings, 2 teachers, all alive, all safe. Then she let herself fall into darkness. She woke up 4 days later in the medical bay. Her body felt like one giant bruise. Bandages covered her arms where the radiation had burned through her damaged suit. Her oxygen-deprived brain had given her a splitting headache, but she was alive. In the bed next to her, Minho was also awake. His right arm was wrapped in so many bandages it looked like a white cocoon. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear. "We did it," he said. "We did," Hana agreed. The door opened and Drexnell entered, along with several Velcrin adults. The Torgath security chief looked uncomfortable, which was strange for such a large and normally confident warrior. "I have resigned my position," Drexnall said without preamble. "I declared evacuation when rescue was possible." 3 months had passed since the boot incident, and Hana's life had become very strange. She woke up each morning to find hundreds of messages on her datapad. Most were from alien species she had never heard of, all wanting to know the same thing. Why hadn't she run away? The video of her walking with the Mauler cub had spread across the galactic network faster than anyone expected. Someone on her team had uploaded the footage, and within days, trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds had watched it. The title that stuck was simple: "The Boot That Wouldn't Break." Different species had very different reactions. The Velcrin called her behavior dangerously unstable and suggested she undergo psychological evaluation. The warrior clans of the Kravik people declared her honor-bound to foolishness, which Hana learned was actually meant as a compliment in their culture. The peaceful Grashid simply couldn't understand why she hadn't activated a shield and retreated to safety. Hana tried to ignore the attention and focus on her work. She had cataloged 147 new species since arriving on Velthara 7. She had documented 3 different types of symbiotic relationships that the Council scientists had missed. She had even prevented a forest fire by noticing unusual behavior in the local wildlife that indicated underground heat buildup. But the Galactic Council couldn't ignore her anymore. They sent Commander Taman to investigate whether she had broken any first contact protocols. Taman arrived on a Tuesday morning. Hana was in the field, checking on a family of tree-dwelling creatures that built nests from crystallized sap. She looked up to see a human male walking toward her through the jungle. He wore the formal uniform of the Council Liaison Corps, which looked completely out of place among the vines and flowers. "Dr. Hana?" he called out. "Just Hana is fine," she said, climbing down from the tree she had been examining. "You must be Commander Taman." "I am." He looked around at the jungle, then back at her. "I expected you to be at the research station. Your colleagues said you spend most of your time out here." "The interesting things don't usually come to the station," Hana said. She brushed some dirt off her hands. "Would you like some water?" "It's hot today." Taman accepted the canteen she offered. He drank, then looked at her carefully. "I've been sent to determine if your actions 3 months ago violated Council safety protocols." "The cub?" "Yes. Category 9 predators require specific handling procedures." "You ignored all of them." Hana nodded slowly. "I read the protocols after the incident. I understand why they exist. But that cub was hurt and scared. The protocols didn't have a section for that situation. The protocols assume you would observe from a safe distance and call for specialized wildlife response teams. How long would that have taken? Approximately 6 hours for a team to arrive from the nearest station. The cub would have lost its paw by then," Hana said quietly. "Maybe died from blood loss or infection. The trap was cutting off circulation." Taman wrote something on his datapad. "The protocols prioritize the safety of Council personnel over individual animals." "I know," Hana said. "I just couldn't follow them in that moment." Over the next 3 days, Taman interviewed everyone at the research station. Hana continued her work and tried not to think about what might happen. Would they send her back to Earth? Ban her from fieldwork? She loved this job. She loved being on Velthara 7. On the 4th day, Taman asked to speak with Blorpix, the Grashid scientist. Hana happened to be nearby organizing her sample cases. When she heard their conversation, "Tell me about the toxic spore incident," Taman said. Blorpix's throat sac inflated, which Hana had learned meant he was uncomfortable. "It was 6 weeks ago. We were surveying the southern swamps. I made an error and walked into a spore cloud from a fungal bloom. The spores are highly toxic to Grashid physiology. I would have died within hours without treatment." "What did Hana do?" "She carried me." Blorping's voice was quiet. "For 6 hours. Through the swamp. The spores were toxic to humans as well, but less immediately lethal. She knew she was being poisoned with every breath. I told her to leave me and get help. She refused." "Why?" "She said, 'You're my friend and I'm not leaving you.' Then she made a joke about how I needed to lose weight." Blorpix made the clicking sound that was Grashid laughter. "By the time we reached the medical station, her skin was covered in blisters. Her lungs were damaged. She required 2 weeks of treatment." "Did she complain?" "No, she asked if I was all right. Then she fell unconscious." Taman wrote more notes. Hana quietly moved away before they noticed her listening. That evening, Velkith also spoke to Taman. This time Hana wasn't present, but Velkith told her about it later. I informed Commander Taman that your insane mammalian pain tolerance is both your greatest asset and greatest liability, Velkith said, his antennae twitching. I also informed him that you have saved lives multiple times and that your research is impeccable. Your field notes are the most detailed and accurate I have ever reviewed. Thank you, Hana said, genuinely touched. I still think you are dangerously unstable, Velkith added, but I have learned that human instability often produces positive results. On the 6th day of Taman's visit, everything went wrong at once. A malfunction in the research station's environmental system triggered a cascade failure. Biological containment was breached. The fungal samples that Hana had collected from the southern swamps began releasing spores throughout the station. The alarm system screamed. Red lights flashed. The automated voice repeated the same message. Biological contamination detected. All personnel to panic rooms. Seal all sections. Hana was in her quarters when it happened. She grabbed her emergency respirator and ran to the common area. The alien staff were already sealing themselves in the reinforced panic rooms, designed to protect against exactly this kind of emergency. Taman was there too, his respirator already in place. He looked at Hana and she could see the decision in his eyes before he spoke. The contamination is spreading, he said. If we don't scrub it manually, it will reach the panic rooms within hours. These respirators won't protect the others once the concentration gets high enough. How long do we have? To clean the entire affected area? 14 hours, maybe 16. Hana checked her respirator seals. The device would filter most of the spores, but not all. They would definitely be exposed. The corrosive properties of these particular spores meant their skin would blister. Their eyes would burn. It would hurt. Well, Hana said, better get started. They worked together, moving from section to section with cleaning equipment. The spores were visible in the air, tiny purple particles that seemed to glow in the emergency lighting. Hana's arms started burning after the first hour. By the 3rd hour, her skin was covered in angry red blisters. Taman wasn't doing much better. His face was swollen, his eyes barely open, but he kept working, spraying neutralizing solution and scrubbing surfaces. Why are we like this? He asked at one point, his voice muffled by the respirator. Like what? Hana was on her knees cleaning the lower wall panels. Humans. Why do we keep going when it hurts? Hana thought about it while she worked. I don't know. Maybe because someone has to. Maybe because stopping feels worse than continuing. That doesn't make logical sense. I know. They worked through the night. Hana's vision started to blur around hour 10. Her hands were shaking by hour 12. But she thought about Velkith and Blorix and all the others sealed in the panic rooms, trusting that someone would fix this problem. At hour 14, they finished. The contamination levels dropped to safe ranges. The alarm finally stopped. Hana and Taman stumbled to the medical bay and collapsed. Hana woke up 2 days later. Her skin was bandaged and her throat felt like sandpaper. Taman was in the bed next to hers, also bandaged but awake. Your report? Hana managed to ask. Taman smiled, though it clearly hurt his blistered face. I'm writing that humanity doesn't understand retreat when others are depending on them. I'm also recommending that you receive a council commendation. Really? Though I'm also noting that working with humans requires accepting that they will regularly do things that seem completely insane. Hana laughed, then immediately regretted it because it hurt. That seems fair. 3 days later, Taman left Velthara 7. His final report was shared with the Galactic Council. The title was simple: Human Persistence, a new variable in Council operations. The report went viral even faster than the boot video. Across the galaxy, beings started talking about humans and their strange refusal to quit, when quitting was the logical choice. Hana went back to her work, still cataloging species and exploring the jungle. But now, when she walked through the forest, she sometimes saw the young mauler watching her from a distance. It had grown bigger in 3 months, but it still remembered her. And somewhere in the council chambers, beings were starting to wonder. If humans wouldn't quit when their own lives were at risk, what would they do when others needed help? The jungle smelled like rain and something sweet that Hana couldn't identify. She pushed through the thick green leaves, her boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. Behind her, the research team moved slowly, their equipment beeping and clicking as they recorded everything they saw. Velthara 7 was beautiful. The trees grew so tall that Hana had to tilt her head all the way back to see the tops. Purple flowers the size of dinner plates hung from vines. Small creatures with 6 legs and bright blue fur watched them from the branches, chirping sounds that almost seemed like laughter. "This planet is remarkable," said Velkith, one of the insectoid researchers. His 4 eyes blinked independently as he scanned the forest. "But we must maintain proper safety distances. The regulations are clear." Hana nodded but didn't stop walking. She had read all the regulations before coming here. She knew that Velthara 7 had dangerous predators. She also knew that understanding those predators was why she was here. The team had been walking for 3 hours when Hana's scanner started beeping rapidly. She stopped and looked at the small screen. Large life forms ahead. Multiple signatures. Her heart beat faster, but not from fear, from excitement. "I'm detecting the maulers," she said quietly, "about 200 meters north." The Grushid scientist, a greenish amphibian named Blorpix, immediately activated his personal shield. The humming blue barrier appeared around his body. "We should retreat. Council protocols state that Category 9 predators require observation from minimum safe distance of 500 meters. "I know," Hana said. "But look at this." She pointed to her scanner. "One of the signatures is small and isn't moving with the others. Something might be wrong." Velkith's antennae quivered with what Hana had learned was anxiety. "Human Hana, your species is new to the Galactic Council. Perhaps you do not understand the danger. Maulers are apex predators. They have 6 legs, each with claws that can slice through steel. Their bite force exceeds that of your Earth's ancient tyrannosaurs. They hunt in packs and show no mercy." "I understand," Hana said. She adjusted her field kit on her belt. "That's why I'm going to be very careful. You all can stay here. I'll just take a quick look." "This is against all protocols," Velkith said, but his voice was quieter now. Hana had noticed that the insectoid species rarely gave direct orders. They preferred to state facts and let others make decisions. "I'll be fine," Hana said. She smiled at them, trying to look confident. "I've worked with dangerous animals on Earth. I know how to move slowly and stay calm." She moved forward alone, leaving the team behind. The jungle seemed to grow quieter as she walked. The small blue creatures stopped chirping. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Hana found the nest in a clearing. It was massive, built from fallen trees and packed mud. The structure was actually quite beautiful in its own way, carefully constructed and clearly maintained. Around it she could see the adult maulers. They were even larger than she had imagined. Each creature stood nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulder. Their 6 legs moved with surprising grace as they paced around the clearing. Their fur was deep brown with golden stripes, and their heads were broad with powerful jaws. They looked like a combination of Earth's big cats and bears, but more dangerous than either. Hana's breath caught in her throat. They were magnificent. Then she saw the cub. It was smaller, maybe the size of a large dog. It was lying near the edge of the clearing, and even from her position behind a tree, Hana could see that something was wrong. The cub was trying to move but couldn't. Its front paw was caught in something metal. A trap. Someone had put a trap here. Anger flashed through Hana. Trapping was illegal on protected research worlds. Some poacher had broken the law, and now this baby was suffering. The adult maulers seemed agitated. They circled near the cub but didn't approach the trap. They must have learned that the metal was dangerous. Hana watched as the mother, a large female with a scarred face, paced back and forth. She would get close to the cub, then back away, growling in frustration. Hana made a decision. She stepped out from behind the tree. The adult maulers immediately saw her. Their heads snapped in her direction. Several dropped into hunting crouches, their muscles tensing. The mother roared, a sound so deep and loud that Hana felt it in her chest. "It's okay," Hana said softly, even though she knew they couldn't understand her words. "I'm here to help." She moved slowly, keeping her hands visible. With each step, she expected the adults to charge. But they didn't. They watched her with intelligent eyes, growling low warnings but not attacking. Hana reached the cub. Up close, she could see that it was in pain. Its paw was bleeding where the trap's teeth had bit into the flesh. The cub looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. "Hey there," Hana whispered. Let me help you. She knelt down beside the trap. As she did, the cub lunged forward and clamped its jaws around her boot. The reinforced material held, but she could feel the pressure. The cub's teeth couldn't penetrate the military-grade polymer, but it was definitely trying. Okay, Hana said calmly. I guess you're scared? That's all right. You can hold on if it makes you feel better. She examined the trap mechanism while the cub held her boot in its mouth. It was a simple spring device, illegal but effective. She pulled a small tool from her kit and began working on the release. In her ear, the communicator crackled. Hana, your vital signs show elevated stress. What is happening? It was Velkith, his voice high with panic. I'm fine, Hana said quietly, not wanting to startle the animals, just helping someone out. She worked the mechanism carefully. The trap was old and rusty, which actually made it easier. After 2 minutes of steady pressure, the spring released. The trap opened and the cub's paw came free. The cub immediately scrambled backward but didn't let go of Hana's boot. Now it was just hanging there, all 4 of its free legs dangling, its teeth still locked on the reinforced material. Hana slowly stood up. The cub came with her, suspended from her right foot. It wasn't particularly heavy, maybe 15 kilograms, but it was awkward. Well, Hana said, I guess we're walking together. The mother mauler approached, sniffing the air. She came close enough that Hana could have touched her, but the human stayed very still. The large predator examined her cub, saw that the paw was free, and made a rumbling sound deep in her throat. Then she turned and walked back to the rest of the pack. Hana took that as permission to leave. She started walking back toward her team, the cub still firmly attached to her boot. Each step was a bit awkward, but she managed a steady pace. The walk back to base camp was 2 kilometers. Hana walked the entire distance with the cub hanging from her foot. Occasionally, she would reach down and gently pat its head. You're okay now, she would say. You're safe. The cub's grip never loosened. When Hana finally reached the camp, her entire team was staring at her. Velkith's 4 eyes were all open as wide as possible. Blorpix had his shield at maximum power. 3 other researchers had emergency evacuation packs ready. Hello, everyone, Hana said cheerfully. Made a new friend. She knelt down and gently rubbed the cub's ears. After a moment, the young mauler finally released her boot. It looked up at her one more time, made a small chirping sound, then turned and ran back toward the jungle. Hana stood up and brushed the dirt off her pants. Did someone get video of the trap? We need to report that to the authorities. Nobody spoke. They all just stared at her. Finally, Velkith found his voice. Human Hana, he said slowly. You just walked 2 kilometers with a Category 9 predator attached to your body. Yes, Hana said. It was scared and needed help, but it could have killed you. Hana smiled. But it didn't, and now it's safe. That's what matters. She turned and walked into the research station, leaving her stunned colleagues behind. In her mind, she was already writing her field report. It had been a good day. A year had passed since Hana walked away with a cub chomping her boot, and now she was returning to Velthara 7. But this time the jungle wasn't the same. Even from orbit, she could see the damage. Brown patches spreading through the green. Rivers that reflected the wrong color in the sunlight. Something was killing this world. Illegal mining operations, Captain Taman said from the pilot's seat. He had been promoted after the Breakpoint Station incident, and now commanded a small diplomatic vessel. The Kravik Dominion has been extracting rare minerals for 9 months. The waste is poisoning the water systems. Hana pressed her hand against the window. The maulers? The population is dying. The latest survey shows numbers are down by 60%. Cubs aren't surviving. Adults are too weak to hunt effectively. Behind them, Minho adjusted his arm brace. His injury from Breakpoint Station had healed, but not perfectly. He still needed the brace for heavy work. The council is debating intervention, but the Kravik hold legal mining rights. Any military action would trigger a war. So we're just going to watch the planet die? Unji asked. She was the newest member of the team, a human environmental engineer who specialized in ecosystem restoration. That's unacceptable. That's why we're here, Taman said. We're going to document everything, provide evidence that forces the council to act through diplomatic channels instead of military ones. It's slower, but it's the only option that doesn't start a galactic war. The ship landed near Hana's old research station. The building was still there, but it looked abandoned. The jungle around it was dying. Plants that had been vibrant green were now gray and withered. The air smelled wrong, chemical and bitter. They spent the first day setting up equipment. Yoonji analyzed water samples and soil composition. Minho recorded atmospheric data and tracked the spread of contamination. Taemin documented everything with official council equipment, building the legal case they would need. Hana went walking in the jungle, following old paths she remembered. The damage was worse up close. Animals that had been everywhere a year ago were gone. The small blue creatures with 6 legs had vanished. The crystal sap trees were dead, their bark cracked and oozing black fluid. She found the clearing where she had freed the cub from the trap. The nest was still there, but it was falling apart, unmaintained. No maulers were visible. For a moment, Hana feared they had all died. Then she heard movement in the trees, slow, careful movement. She turned and saw them. The pack emerged from the dying forest. There were fewer than before, maybe 20 adults where there had been 40. They moved slowly, their powerful bodies thin and weak. Their beautiful fur was dull and patchy. These magnificent predators were starving. At the front of the pack was the mother with the scarred face. And beside her, much larger now but still recognizable, was the cub Hana had freed. It was almost adult size, though thin like the others. Its eyes locked onto Hana immediately. Hana stood very still. The pack surrounded her in a loose circle. Any one of them could kill her easily, even in their weakened state. She didn't reach for her communicator or her emergency beacon. She just waited. The young mauler approached slowly. It stopped right in front of her and lowered its head, making a soft rumbling sound. Hana carefully reached out and touched its head, running her fingers through the fur like she had done a year ago when it was small enough to dangle from her boot. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry this happened to your home." The scarred mother approached next. She was larger than Hana remembered, even weakened by starvation, the matriarch of the pack. She sniffed at Hana, then made a decision. She turned and walked toward the nest, looking back once to see if Hana would follow. Hana followed. The pack led her through the jungle to the source of the contamination. A massive mining operation, illegal but protected by Kravik Dominion laws. Huge machines tore into the earth, extracting glowing minerals and leaving toxic waste that poured into the ground and water. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Hana understood. The maulers knew where the poison was coming from. They knew what was killing them. But they couldn't stop it. They needed help. She activated her communicator. "Taemin, I've found the mining site. And I've made contact with the maulers. They brought me here. They understand what's happening." "That's incredible," Taemin said. "But Hana, you need to get away from there. If the Kravik security sees you near their operation, they'll consider it an act of espionage." "I know. Coming back now." Over the next 3 weeks, the team worked with the pack. It started slowly, with Hana bringing purified water to the clearing each day. The maulers drank eagerly, their bodies desperate for clean fluid. Yoonji set up portable filtration systems near the contaminated streams, creating small clean water sources. Minho taught himself to identify which areas were most toxic using remote sensors, then marked safe zones using visual signals the maulers could understand. Bright fabric strips that meant safe and dark strips that meant dangerous. The pack learned quickly. Taemin documented everything with his official equipment, building a case that the mining operation was violating interstellar environmental laws. The footage of the dying maulers, the poisoned water, the spreading contamination, it was damning evidence. But evidence took time to process through council bureaucracy. The maulers didn't have time. Hana started treating the injured animals directly. A young male with an infected wound, a female with respiratory problems from breathing toxic air. She used her medical supplies carefully, knowing she couldn't save everyone but trying to save who she could. The pack began bringing their cubs to her. The younglings were the weakest, their small bodies hit hardest by the contamination. Hana worked through nights, helping cubs breathe, treating chemical burns, providing clean water and what food she could spare. The young mauler that had bitten her boot stayed close at all times now. It seemed to understand that Hana was trying to help. It would herd the other cubs toward her, would stand guard while she worked, would press against her side when she was tired. "You're pack bonding with apex predators," Minho observed one evening. He was helping Yoonji install another filtration system. "That's very on brand for humans." "They need help," Hana said simply. "What else would I do?" On the 23rd day, everything changed. The Kravik Dominion discovered their presence. Security forces arrived at the research station with weapons and orders to eliminate espionage threats. Taemin's diplomatic credentials bought them time, but not much. The Kravik commander, a large warrior named Drexikal, made it clear they had 24 hours to leave the planet or face arrest. We have evidence of environmental crimes, Taemin argued. The Council must review this before any action is taken. The Council has no authority here. This is Dominion territory. Drexikal's expression was hard. Leave now or die here. That night the team gathered in the research station. They had enough evidence to make a case in Council court. But the legal process would take months. By then the Maulers would be extinct. We have to leave, Taemin said. He looked miserable saying it. I hate it, but we have to. We can fight this from Council chambers. The Maulers don't have months, Hana said. I know, but if we stay, we die. The Kravik will kill us and destroy all our evidence, Yunji spoke up. What if we don't leave? Then we die, Taemin repeated. Maybe. Or maybe we buy enough time for the evidence to reach the right people. Yunji looked at each of them. We send everything we've collected to the Council now. Encrypted, multiple copies sent to different representatives. Then we stay here and make as much noise as possible. The Kravik won't want to kill Council citizens if everyone is watching. That's assuming they care about galactic opinion, Minho said, but he was smiling slightly. On the other hand, we are pretty famous for doing stupid things. Persistent things, Hana corrected. Taemin laughed despite the situation. You're all insane. But you're right. If we leave, nothing changes. If we stay, maybe we buy enough time for help to arrive. They sent the data that night. Multiple encrypted packages. All the evidence they had gathered transmitted to Council representatives who had shown support for environmental protection. They included footage of Hana working with the Maulers, of the dying jungle, of the illegal mining operations. Then they moved their camp to the clearing near the nest. If the Kravik were going to arrest them, they would do it in view of the Maulers. The Kravik mercenaries came at dawn, 20 armed warriors equipped with weapons designed to kill efficiently. They found the humans sitting in the clearing, surrounded by Maulers. Drexikal was leading the group personally. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, seeing the situation. 4 unarmed humans sitting calmly while Category 9 predators lay around them like protective guards. You were ordered to leave, Drexikal said. We declined, Taemin replied. Then you will be arrested, or killed if you resist. The scarred matriarch stood up. She moved to stand between the mercenaries and the humans. The rest of the pack rose as well, forming a protective circle. They were starving and weak, but they were still apex predators, and they had decided these humans were pack. Drexikal assessed the situation. You have trained these creatures to defend you. Clever. We didn't train them, Hana said. We helped them. There's a difference. It does not matter. The delegation arrived on Earth during the first week of autumn. Their ship descended through the atmosphere and landed in the designated diplomatic zone outside Seoul. 12 different species emerged, but everyone knew who was in charge. Ambassador Rixnall walked down the ramp first, his 4 eyes taking in everything, his antennae twitching with what might have been nervousness or curiosity. The Velkrin had studied humanity longer than any other Council species. Rixnall had spent 20 years reading every report, watching every video, analyzing every incident. He thought he understood these strange mammals. Now he needed to confirm his theories in person. Dr. Jiwoo waited at the base of the ramp. She was Earth's chief xenobiologist and had been chosen to represent humanity because she was calm, knowledgeable, and had never done anything as dramatic as walking with a predator attached to her boot. The Council had specifically requested someone normal. Ambassador Rixnall, Jiwoo said, bowing slightly. Welcome to Earth. Thank you, Dr. Jiwoo. Rixnall's translator device rendered his clicking speech into perfect Korean. I apologize for arriving with such a large delegation. The Council felt that multiple perspectives would be valuable. Of course, we've prepared accommodations for everyone. Over the next 3 days, the delegation met with various human officials. They toured the diplomatic facilities, reviewed trade agreements, discussed scientific cooperation. Everything was cordial and professional, but none of this was why they had really come. On the 4th day, Captain Soo-yeon arrived. She entered the conference room in her military uniform, medals on her chest, her bearing confident but not aggressive. She sat across from Rixnall and waited. Captain Soo-hyun, Rixnal began, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. The Council has sent us to discuss a concern that has arisen regarding human behavior in Council spaces. The incidents. Soo-hyun said, yes, the incidents. Rixnal activated a holographic display. Videos began playing in the air above the table. Hana walking with the Mauler cub. Taemin and Hana cleaning the contaminated station. Minho and Hana rescuing the Velkrin younglings. Then more videos that Soo-hyun hadn't seen before. A human medic treating wounded soldiers while enemy fire streaked overhead, refusing to leave until everyone was evacuated. A human rescue worker running into a burning building 3 separate times to search for survivors. A human civilian forming a chain with strangers to save someone drowning in a river. Dozens of incidents, hundreds of examples, all showing the same pattern. You must have genetic defects, Rixnal said finally. The bluntness was surprising, but his tone wasn't cruel. It was genuinely confused. No species evolves such maladaptive behavior. Self-preservation is the most basic instinct. Yet humans regularly override this instinct for illogical reasons. Illogical, Soo-hyun repeated. Saving a single animal cub when retreat would ensure your own survival? That is illogical. Exposing yourself to toxic contamination when sealed shelters are available? Illogical. Attempting rescue when the mathematics prove it is impossible? Deeply illogical. Rixnal leaned forward. We have analyzed human psychology extensively. We understand your tribal instincts, your pack bonding, your emotional attachments. But this behavior extends beyond your own tribes. You risk yourselves for strangers, for other species, even for animals that might kill you. Jiwoo spoke up. Ambassador, with respect, you're viewing this through a purely logical framework. Human behavior isn't always about logic. Clearly, Rixnal said, that is our concern. How can the Council work with a species that cannot be relied upon to act logically in crisis situations? Soo-hyun smiled slightly. May I tell you a story, Ambassador? Rixnal's antennae straightened with interest. Please. 300,000 years ago, humans were not the dominant species on Earth. We were prey as often as we were predators. We were not the fastest, not the strongest, not the best adapted to our environment. But we had one advantage that let us survive and eventually thrive. Tool use, suggested one of the other delegates. A Grashid scientist. No, many species use tools. Our advantage was persistence. Soo-hyun stood and walked to the window looking out over the city. Our ancestors hunted by following prey for days, running after animals that were faster than us until those animals collapsed from exhaustion. We call it persistence hunting. The prey could sprint away, could rest, but we just kept coming. Step after step, hour after hour, day after day. This explains your physical endurance, Rixnal said, but not your psychological patterns. It's the same thing, Soo-hyun said, turning back to face them. We evolved to keep going. Not because we're stronger or smarter or more capable, but because we don't know when to quit. That trait that helped our ancestors run down prey became part of who we are. We apply it to everything. Problems, challenges, dangers. Other species calculate whether something is worth the cost. We just keep going until it's done. Jiwoo added, and because we lived in tribes, we evolved to extend that persistence to our group. If a tribe member was injured, you stayed with them. You didn't abandon them because it was inefficient. You stayed because the tribe's survival depended on everyone staying. That's why humans pack bonds so easily, even with other species, even with animals. Our brains are wired to think this is my tribe and then refuse to abandon tribe members. But the Mauler cub was not part of Hana's tribe. Rixnal protested. In that moment, it was, Jiwoo said simply. Hana saw a baby in pain and her brain said tribe member needs help. Logic didn't matter. The threat didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was helping someone who needed it. One of the Kravik delegates spoke up, his voice a deep rumble. Among my people, such behavior would be called warrior's honor, to help those who cannot help themselves regardless of cost. But warriors choose this path through training and discipline. You say all humans are like this? Most of us, Soo-hyun said. Some humans calculate better cost-benefit ratios. Some are more cautious. But in general, yes. When someone needs help, we have a hard time walking away. Rixnal was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, the Council would like to observe this behavior directly. May we tour some of your emergency response facilities? Of course, Jiwoo said. Over the next week, the delegation saw more of Earth than they had planned. They visited fire stations and watched firefighters train, running into burning buildings as practice. They observed search and rescue teams coordinating disaster response. They toured hospitals where doctors and nurses worked 12-hour shifts and then volunteered for extra hours because they were needed. At a veterinary clinic, they watched a human child, maybe 7 years old, crying over an injured bird she had found. The vet carefully examined the bird, explained that its wing was broken, and spent an hour setting the tiny bone and wrapping it. The child asked how much it would cost. "For you? Nothing," the vet said, smiling. "You did a good thing bringing her here. That deserves a reward, not a bill." Rixnall watched this interaction with his 4 eyes unblinking. They witnessed a traffic accident where multiple humans immediately stopped to help, not waiting for official responders. They saw a community rebuild a neighborhood after a flood, volunteers working side by side with strangers. They watched an elderly woman stand between wildlife officers and a bear cub, refusing to let them euthanize it because its mother was dead, insisting there had to be another way. There was always another way. There was always someone willing to try, to keep going, to help. On their final day, the delegation gathered again in the conference room. Rixnall looked tired, which Jiwoo had learned meant his antennae drooped slightly. "I must revise my report to the council," Rixnall said. "I came here believing that humans like Hana and Minho and Taemin were anomalies. Exceptional individuals whose behavior did not represent your species as a whole. And now?" Sohyun asked. "Now I understand that they are not anomalies. They are examples. Every human we have observed shows some degree of this behavior. The tendency to persist beyond logical stopping points, the refusal to abandon others in need, the emotional attachment that overrides self-preservation." He paused. "You are all like this." "Yes," Jiwoo said. "We are." "This is going to change everything," Rixnall said quietly. "The council has operated on certain assumptions about behavior and decision-making, about what rational beings do in crisis situations. Your species violates all of those assumptions. Is that a problem?" Sohyun asked. "I do not know yet, but the council must adapt to this reality." Rixnall stood and the rest of the delegation stood with him. "I will recommend that humans be given more active roles in emergency response and crisis situations. Not because you are stronger or more intelligent than other species, but because you will stay when others logically retreat. You will keep trying when others have calculated that success is impossible." "We'll do our best," Jiwoo said. "That is what concerns me," Rixnall said. "Your best is a frightening concept. You do not stop at reasonable limits. You push until you physically cannot continue, and even then, you sometimes keep going anyway." As the delegation prepared to leave Earth, Rixnall stood at the ship's window, looking down at the blue planet. One of his assistants approached. "Ambassador, you seem troubled." "I am composing my report," Rixnall said. "The council asked me to determine if humanity poses a threat to Galactic.